Good evening from the Rooster Inn Observatory. I will start by extending an apology or a regret for a change of venue. When I chose M33 Triangulum Galaxy this morning for the comparison, I was looking primarily to maximize exposure time between sunset and moonrise. I had not seen the exact same comparison that Scott Comella had done. So many of you recommended that we do M31 instead, hence M31. So DWARF won the coin toss, so I'm going to start with the calibration. And while it is calibrating, I will do the same with the Seestar. Seestar does not have a calibration step, but rather when you select the target, it takes a snapshot of the heavens, knows what it's aiming at, and then goes towards M31 and then double checks that that's what it has. For whatever reason, the DWARF app insists on turning portrait, landscape, I should say, instead of staying portrait. That cramps the space a little bit. Okay, calibration success. Now we can ask it to go to M31. In the meantime, Seestar has just found M31. You can see it under the word cancel. And it is centering and focusing and doing everything that it needs to do. To keep the comparison even, I'm going to use the same gain of 90 and the same exposure of 10 seconds on the DWARF as we have on the Seestar. My rule of thumb is if it's a nebula, it's our IR pass, infrared pass. Everything else, it's infrared cut. So we have 10 seconds, a gain of 90. Okay, here's the filter. It has switched out. And we should be ready to start. Both of them have the galaxy where it belongs. So we're going to start. I'd like to capture about an hour or so and see what we end up with. I attended to focusing DWARF earlier. I do not like its astro mode autofocus. Many times it misses completely. So I did the focus manually and it looks good. The DWARF has already stacked 4. And the Seestar has its first. This is another difference. James, yes, I definitely plan to do M33. It is one of my favorite galaxies. I'd like to do justice and cover them for multiple hours. Yeah, M33 has a lot more character than M31, but if you have not seen Scott's video on YouTube, it is definitely worth watching. He did justice in comparing the two. One metric that I have used with smart telescope or electronically assisted astronomy is the ratio of stack time to clock time. Usually it's about half, 50%. And we'll keep an eye on that. We started stacking at about 7:33. So we have been stacking for about 3 minutes, and M31 on Seestar is a minute and a half, which is half roughly. And the dwarf is a little bit farther ahead. Good evening, Bobby. Yeah, I've had my zoo for 1 day. It arrived yesterday. Uh, it was not a steep learning curve. I have to admit, I don't know if you saw the process here. Once you connect to it, you just select the target. There is no calibration, no initialization, no autofocusing. It does all of that on its own. One thing that I discovered in the past few hours is that the Seestar will have a filter in front of the sensor, and it will choose whether to use the light pollution filter or the infrared filter based on the target. So in this case, the light pollution filter is turned off, which means it is using the IR pass, sorry, IR cut, given that we are imaging a galaxy. One of the fascinating things about the Seestar is the sky atlas. It is an impressive design that allows you to basically surf the sky, and you can pick and click on any object and it will go to it. Bobby, I have to agree with you. Let me see if I can stop it and have it refocus. Uh, dee -dee 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 -dee. Let's see if this is better. James, both have two heaters. I checked the weather, and we're running at very, very high humidity tonight, so I turned the two heater on both. The Seestar calls it two heater, whereas the DWARF calls it CPU high performance mode. Bobby, do things look focused in focus to you now? Yeah, thanks for bringing it to my attention. Don't know what happened there. It's supposed to autofocus on its own as part of the enhancing part. I made the deliberate decision not to use outside power on either of them, uh, just for the sake of another comparison here to see how long the battery will carry us. Dwarf has one big advantage over the Seestar, namely the USB port is in the base that does not move. So you don't have to worry about tangling wires, but the Seestar, uh, the USB port moves as the telescope moves. Yeah, I can see the armbands on both of them. Since we're talking about smart telescopes, I want to mention Stellina for just 1 second. Uh, in the case of the dwarf, the alignment of the sensor is consistent with that of the galaxy, whereas with the Seestar, the sensor is aligned in the wrong direction to the galaxy. Stellina allows us to turn the sensor around and align it in any direction that you want. William, uh, you cannot enter coordinates into the zoo with the two howevers. It has a catalog of comets in there, and I plan to try those comets. Actually, it's an extensive catalog of comets that you can click on. It also has a very, very good sky atlas, and you can point and click on any point of that sky atlas, and it will go there. So if you know the right ascension and the declination of your target, you can go into the sky atlas and find it and click on it. I may find myself telling you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, repeatedly tonight that I've had the Seestar for just one day. It arrived yesterday afternoon, and I'm still learning the ins and outs. Uh, Bobby, your understanding is correct. The zoo is very, very finicky when it comes to perfect flat surface. It has to be totally level, and no, it will not allow, it will not ride on a wedge the way the dwarf would. One reminder that it should not escape your attention, but I paid only $400 for each of those telescopes. If you consider everything that's inside them, uh, just the parts, the components add up to a lot more than 400. It's incredibly amazing what they can do. Earlier this afternoon on Facebook, one of the comments uh, asked about the unfair comparison between Seestar and dwarf given the aperture. And my reply was it'd be interesting to see if removing the binning that's built into dwarf now, the beta version of the software that many are testing, I don't have a beta copy. The beta version, when it's released next month, they promised us, will allow us to choose no binning. The sensor on the dwarf is 8 megapixels and it has an aperture of 1 inch. The sensor on the Seestar is 2 megapixels with an aperture of 2 inches. So, in round numbers, it's six of one, half a dozen of the other. So, my comment was it'll be interesting to see if removing the binning, what that will do to the size of the picture itself, whether the picture is going to shrink or we're going to stay with the same dimensions eventually. Now, for those who are technology minded, let me share with you the setup that I had to do. I use screen copy and put my cell phone or my tablet in debug mode, and that's how I can display it on my computer and control it with my mouse from the computer. But I could not find uh, any software that will allow me to have two devices connected at the same time. So I resorted to having two laptops, and I am using a Chrome remote to render one of them. The Seestar is running on a different computer, and this is the dwarf connected directly to this machine. TCP/IP, not good to see you here. Nice chatting with you earlier today. DWARF has the ability to display a histogram and move it around if you're not happy with what you see. Uh, I was surprised that Seestar, the designers, made the decision to take away a lot of the flexibility that DWARF gives us. With DWARF, I can select exposure time, gain, and lots of other things. Seestar, you're stuck with 10 seconds and 90 dB. What has created is the inability to image the planets. I got a very, very good shot of Jupiter yesterday, but it was overexposed and I could not reduce the exposure. Uh, Dwarf does not do too well with planets, but it does allow me to reduce the exposure. Needless to say, neither of them is meant for planetary imaging. Yeah, TCP/IP not. I hope you know how to put your phone in debug mode. It's going to the about part and finding the version number of the phone and tapping it, 7, 9 times, and that will get you into debug mode. And then you just select USB connection to be a debug mode, and then screen copy is free software, and it has served me well. Uh, just a word of disclaimer. Any ads that YouTube runs in the stream or on the channel uh, does not imply in any way, shape, or form my endorsement, concurrence, or agreement with the contents of those ads. I have zero control over what ads YouTube runs on the channel. Big picture, they are hosting all my content for free, not charging me any money, and give me the ability to uh, access all of you guys and talk to you, and that's good enough. Where do we get screen copy? If you search for SCR-CPY, let me see if I can search for it quickly. Yeah, GitHub has downloads for Android, or you can go to scrcpy.org. And you do not install it, you just run it. Yeah, I want to try Visor. Have not had a chance to try it, and to see whether by using Visor for one phone and screen copy for the other, if I can display them both on the same laptop and not need two laptops for a comparison like this one. Incidentally, the tablet that I'm using to control Seestar is a Lenovo 8-inch. Paid $79 for it. It works excellent. It is dedicated for that task. I just ordered the second one. They are on sale on Amazon. The fourth generation is at $78 or $79. This way, I'll be able to run them in parallel and free up my phone to do useful things. I chose not to put the dwarf on an equatorial wedge tonight, just to make the comparison as equal as possible. And we're starting to see the field rotation. If you look at the top, you can start seeing the field rotation. By the way, Andromeda and Triangulum are very nicely situated tonight. They are moving straight up in the sky, so we're not going to suffer too much field rotation. I am under the impression that the Seestar handles field rotation by cropping the image so it doesn't display it at all, and so you do not see the field rotation until it becomes really excessive. So we are at 128 stacked frames with dwarf at 10 seconds each, and we are at 10 minutes with the Seestar. So 10 minutes of Seestar, 20 minutes of dwarf. As a reminder, and for those who joined us recently, uh, I had to reboot the capture of the Seestar because the stars were out of focus. I did a re-autofocus and started from scratch. Another tidbit of interest is that Dwarf is down to 81% battery, whereas Seestar is at 91%. TCP/IP NAT Sharp Cap has been a very useful tool for me. I use it as my go-to for everything with my other scopes. Anything that is not Stellina, Dwarf, or Seestar, Sharp Cap runs them. I found myself having to move the Skyshed pod earlier this summer, and I used Sharp Cap to polar align the Edge HD 11-inch. I was able to polar align it with sharp cap to less than an arc minute, and it tracks beautifully now. I use sharp cap to stack images that are being captured by those big scopes. And since you speak of failed images, you may notice that we don't have any satellite trails on either of the two screens. Both DWARF and Seestar pride themselves on using AI, artificial intelligence, to detect satellite trails in images and delete the trails. For the handful of you folks who jumped on the channel before 7:30, you may have seen a Starlink train go through. On the dwarf was showing satellite after satellite going through before I started the calibration. Stellina has an interesting algorithm. If you catch a satellite trail in the very first frame that it captures, then you're stuck with it. It is there because it does not have any previous frames to compare to deem that line as noise and delete it. But I have not seen satellite trails on Dwarf. I've had my Dwarf for a while, and I've had Seestar for only one day, so I have not done much. But on a night like tonight, where starlings are all over the place, I would have thought uh, we would see one or more. I tried the Seestar on the sun this morning. It is supposed to find the sun on its own. I just turned it on and I said, go find the sun. And it turned around. It had the right elevation, right altitude, and it passed straight through the sun. I saw it in the screen and then I stopped past it and declared failure. Was no big deal. I just moved it back to what it was. I am running version 1.8, and I saw where we have the ability to store all the subs. Yesterday I was trying to image the moon. It was still between trees, and the autofocus decided to focus on the leaves as opposed to the moon itself. And I wish I had version 1.8 yesterday. I have it today. When it comes to sun find failures, they have their heart in the right place. If you know where you are and you know when you are, you should be able to figure out the altitude of the sun and then just go the full 360 degrees until you hit an extremely bright spot, and that'll be the sun. And it went straight through the very center of the screen and just kept going. Is this the only size we have? Actually, no. We can zoom in, but we cannot zoom out. Yeah, the field of view of the Seestar is a lot narrower than that of Dwarf. If my recollection off the top of my head, I think the Seestar has a 1.6 degree field of view, whereas Dwarf has twice that, just over 3 degrees. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the misfortune of the sensor being in the wrong orientation on the Seestar. I had a chance to go to the Adirondacks in May. The Adirondacks is the darkest skies in the northeast of the US. It's Bortle 2 solid. And I did a comparison. I imaged, I think it was M51. I did that both at home with Bortle 4 and then at the Adirondacks with Bortle 2. And I showed, I have a video that shows side by side the difference. It's just undescribable how many more stars you could see by just staring up in a Bortle 2. I've been keeping an eye on northern Pennsylvania, between the area between Scranton and Pittsburgh. If you're familiar with the Northeast US, there are some extremely dark skies there. It's the first dark sky refuge in the US, and it's a fantasy that someday we will buy a house there. As we were looking to see what's available, we found for sale an airport, a church, and a winery, and I guess none of them fit our requirement at this point. Last April 14 and 15, I was at the Northeast Astronomy Forum, and that's when ZWO unveiled the Seestar. I saw it there for the first time. I placed my order on the 17th of April as soon as I got home. And since then, I've learned quite a bit about the device. TCP/IP NAT, are you totally opposed to UDP and ICMP, or do you include them in TCP/IP? My plan is to stay on M31 until we have either way too much field rotation or enough definition So as soon as I have 30 minutes of stack on the M31, I will hop over to M33 with both devices and see what we can get there. Uh, it will not do justice to them, but we have probably about an hour from 8:30 till 9:30 before the moon ruins everything. At which point we'll go to the moon and compare both devices, taking a look at the moon. William, yeah, south of Coudersport, PA is where I'm looking for my next house for my retirement home. It's between Route 15 and the New York State border and going down to Route 80. Good evening, Sydney. Good to see you at night. Yes, we're doing Andromeda comparing the Seestar S50 to the dwarf. And the plan is in about 12 minutes, around 8:30, to hop over to Triangulum M33 for an hour or so. My big project this week is to build a portable observatory. I just received two of the parts, a Home Depot 5-gallon bucket, and I'm waiting for a dog fence window. It's an acrylic dome, a 12-inch diameter, that's supposed to have extremely good transparency in terms of passing light. And I should be able to put either Seestar or DWARF in it and leave it outside in all weather and be able to control it remotely, both to capture and to collect the images. So when I'm done building my portable observatory, I'll make sure to post a video of how I did it. I got a 6-inch acrylic dome, the kind you use for security cameras, and could not tell that I was imaging through the acrylic dome. It looked extremely clear. So I'm hoping that the 12-inch dome will be equally good. In the grand scheme of things, the field of view of the dwarf is ideally suited for Andromeda, and I'm hard pressed to see much difference in quality between the two images. James, in terms of converting photons to photos, yes, it should be 4 times faster. But for whatever reason, the processor on the dwarf is extremely fast. It is stacking those images at an incredible rate compared to the Seestar. Dwarf has stacked 260 frames for Seestar's 150 frames. So it's running at almost twice as many frames being stacked. One nice feature, by the way, on the Seestar is the mark. It uh, it tells you what you're looking at in the sky, and that proved very useful when I was looking at a big cluster, and it identified the individual stars within that cluster. A submersible dome that is not large enough for the dwarf. Okay, it must be smallish. I do not see any field rotation on the Seestar yet. They did say that they display uh, less than the full image as a way to hide the field rotation. It is becoming evident on the dwarf on all 4 sides at this point. James, it depends. SharpCap has the ability now, the latest version, to delete satellite trails by comparing frames and detecting them and then correcting to them by averaging the pixels around them. And it does a fairly good job. I tried it. Yeah, 8 inch in diameter is a bit on the small side. That's the one that I got, 12.4 inch on Amazon. I think it was 20 some dollars, 28, 26, something like that. Now, the difference between the 5-gallon buckets at Lowe's and the 5-gallon buckets at Home Depot uh, is exactly half inch. They differ in diameter by half an inch. So I'm waiting for my dome to arrive because I want to make sure the holes are outside the bucket so it doesn't leak into the bucket. One bit of trivia about Starlink satellites is they are the only satellites in orbit that have the ability to duck when they are likely to come close to another satellite. They literally flatten out completely, uh, paper thin, if you will. The antennas, the solar panels, everything flattens out to reduce the likelihood of collision. And they do that a few thousand times a day, the constellation, and trying to avoid or reduce the risk of collision. And they are the only satellites up there that do that. They're also supposed to be not as bright as others. I'm with you. James, I have to admit, uh, there is something nice about looking up at the sky when we were in Bortle 2 and being able to see with the naked eye satellites going by, and the sky was full of them. Uh, all right, 8:30 as promised. I'm gonna end the M31 experiment for both. In the case of Seestar, this takes us to the catalog, and we can either manually move until we get to M33 or just search for it. And there it is. And we just go gazing. Now it's gonna move. Again, unfortunately, the orientation is not optimal. On the dwarf, we go to the go-to, and there is triangulum, and we send it there. Okay, looks like the Seestar is happy with what it found. The focus is still good, so I'm gonna start stacking. And dwarf found M33. Let oh, not what I wanted to do. All right, we're there. What I meant to do is adjust the exposure to 10 seconds and the gain to 90 and RI cut. And start stacking. Um, sorry, M33 is already taking shape on the Seestar. Okay, there it is on DWARF. If you look at the star pattern just below the galaxy, you can see the same pattern on the Seestar. So we are in the same rough area of the sky. Let me see if Mark will work here. Let's talk about Triangulum Galaxy. Nothing else identifiable within that frame. So I'm gonna stay on M33 for an hour or so till 9:30 and then see if we can pick up the moon at that point. I have a gut instinct that the moon is going to look slightly better on dwarf than it will on the Seestar for a couple reasons. One, the binning. I can turn off binning, and that will give us a full 8 megapixel resolution on the dwarf. And the other reason, the coloring. Dwarf has been extremely good at picking up colors on the surface of the moon. So you will see the bluish and the brownish. Dwarf was the first telescope that allowed me to see the colors on the moon. Don't know if Seestar is gonna be as good in that sense, considering that it's only 2 megapixels, and I think it's the A to D analog to digital converter is only 10 bits on that sensor chip. Okay, while Andromeda looked reasonably comparable between Dwarf and Seestar, the same cannot be said about M33 Triangulum. Yeah, Seestar is blowing the Dwarf out of the water on this one. Bobby, one thing that impressed me about the zoo out of the box is it did not have a plastic bag. When I opened the box, there it was. The battery was charged. I turned it on, and I was looking at trees and the sky literally within minutes. Then, as I tried making them both the same scale, and it's going to be very interesting to see when we are able to turn off binning on Dwarf, if we can resolve the inner core of Triangulum. Matthew, uh, I've had my Dwarf now for several months, and I love it. It's extremely fast at autofocusing, extremely fast at calibration, very small, very portable at 2 pounds. And many times I've taken it with me wherever I go, and I just plop it, and I'm out imaging, whether it's the sun or the night time. Uh, yeah, I cannot see my collection without a Dwarf. It does have its limitations, but it's the only telescope out there with two lenses, two sensors, and allows you to have the wide angle as well as the telescopic, or the telephoto, I should say. I have uh, equatorially mounted the dwarf, and it does a very good job at eliminating field rotation. And we can go for hours. Dennis, I do not have the beta version. I have not tested the one by one binning. I'm looking forward to it. If nothing else, it will make this image a lot more refined, a lot sharper. DWARF is going through its battery a lot faster than Seestar going through its battery. We're down to about 60% battery on the DWARF and 78 on the Seestar. I do have power, so I can power them up when the time comes, but just wanted to observe the battery performance. And both of them have their dew heaters on. By the way, for whatever it's worth, uh, after tonight, we're going to have, according to the weather forecast, 2 weeks of rain. So this may be my last chance to do this comparison until Halloween or thereabouts. By that time, Orion will be high enough. I imaged Orion this morning as well as the Horsehead Nebula and the Flame Nebula with the Seestar. Did not have much time. It was about half an hour each target, and they looked good. They looked good. The Dwarf does an excellent job with Orion as well. Now, with Orion, as with the M33 Triangulum, a good image is one that shows you the four stars at the heart of the galaxy. William, I don't know if there is any way to turn it in software or hardware. I know that Stellina allows me to turn the sensor, but then Stellina is the only telescope where the sensor is uh, equatorially mounted and it's turned with the ground. Both TCP/IP, not it will charge as well as run off power. This is where it gets tricky. USB-C, USB Charlie, you can have high current or low current, depending on what you are using. Dwarf, for example, it will either continue draining the battery but slower, or it will stop draining the battery and use external power, or it will use external power and charge the battery. I have a very small charger, actually. It's the size of a matchbox that provides high current, and that's what I'll be plugging outside. Mentioned earlier that the USB input on the Dwarf is in the base, which does not move, whereas the USB input on the Seestar is on the moving part. So run the risk of tangling the wires if you're doing too much moving around, but should be okay plugging it after it starts. Clouds and rain have one big advantage, namely, I catch up on sleep. Some of the newer ZWO cameras have square sensors, so you don't have to worry about orientation. The markets have not been good lately. I wish you the best in trading them. Okay, this is a clean histogram. Matthew, I tried the dwarf and a Bortle 2, and there was a big difference between Bortle 4 and Bortle 2. If you have not seen my short video comparing Bortle 2 to Bortle 4, it was earlier in the comments, or earlier in the chat, I should say. Let me see if I find it. Yep, there it is. but I've not had a chance to compare Seestar to DWARF. Uh, when it comes to darker skies. Bobby, thank you for mentioning it. The ZWO does the darks automatically. I'm not sure at this point if it does it for every frame or for every capture, but part of the enhancing that it talks about, it takes its own darks, it has a dark filter internally. For the dwarf, you have to take the astro darks manually by putting it in a bag and closing the bag and making sure the lights are turned off and capturing them and storing them. The show does all of that transparent to the viewer, transparent to the user. Okay. Yeah, I have not taken darks more than once per session, but I'm running the risk of being spoiled by the Seestar. Uh, it has a filter wheel with three filters. One of them is a dark filter. So the user does not have to do anything about taking darks, it just takes them. There is one other topic that I want to mention here, and that's the battery. I mentioned that Dwarf was eating its battery a lot faster than the Seestar, but both systems allow you to put an external battery in addition to the internal one and double your capacity, double the time that you go. The Stellina does not allow that, and that is a big difference that I've enjoyed. I just attached an external battery to each of them, and with a bit of luck, we should see the battery start going up as opposed to down. I'm noting 71 on the Seestar. I'd like to see what happens in the next few minutes. Let me shrink the zoom for a moment so you can get an appreciation. That is the picture that Dwarf has so far. Matthew, I made a deliberate decision to use the telescope as is for a full year before I start post-processing. And I've done that with pretty much every telescope that I've ever gotten. Uh, Let it do its best, find out what targets work well and which ones do not. And then you can get into post-processing. Dennis is correct. You cannot equatorially mount the Seestar. I have mounted the Dwarf equatorially and pretty much ran it all night and did not have any field rotation. We have an interesting situation with the Seestar battery right now. It is no longer draining, but it's not charging either. So the external battery is feeding the telescope directly. I can see the lights blinking, which suggests that it is charging, but it is not. It is still stuck at 71. Let's not forget that the Dwarf has two cameras built into it, a wide angle and a telephoto, and it has an excellent ability to track. I had it tracking a loon over Blue Mountain Lake in the Adirondacks, and it tracked the entire flight over the lake. Bobby, I'll take note of Cone and Rosette. I have done Rosette. I will see when we get them here. I need to get rid of the moon first. Yeah, stay tuned. I will let you guys know as soon as I have another clear night. Hopefully the weather forecast is wrong. And then, yeah, I plan to do Nebula. A quick public service announcement. If any of you guys is not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Thank you. Bobby, I used a software called SkyTrack, and I was able to track the International Space Station. I hit it a record 197 frames with the ISS in it. That was using my big scope. Uh, you may want to take a look at it. I only paid $9 for that software. It's Canadian software, and I've been very happy with what it can do. Uh, it would not work with the dwarf, obviously. Bobby, I just posted the link to the software. It is SkyTrack. If you go to heavenscape.com, the price is still $9, and I've been very happy with it. Yeah, your iOptron Cube Pro should have ASCOM interface, and that's what the SkyTracker does. It keeps track of, it downloads the entire uh, satellite catalog, and I've been able to track multiple satellites with it. We probably have another half hour on Triangulum before the moon shows up. I'm anxious to compare the two telescopes when it comes to the moon, the surface of the moon. Fortunately, it's not a full moon, so we'll be able to see the crater at the edge of the moon and see how well they do with the telescopes. According to DWARF, the darks that I took are getting old now. It's starting to show some hot pixels. There are some greens right near the top of the frame. So I'm wondering here, since both machines are sitting in the same temperature, both have their dew heaters on, I'm wondering if Seestar retakes its darks when the temperature changes by a set amount. Steve, if you're talking about histogram stretch uh, on the dwarf, yes, but not on the Seestar. Is that what you had in mind? We have 40 minutes stacked on the Seestar, which makes it 240 frames, and we are at 305 frames on the dwarf. The moon is rising from behind the mountain. It'll take a few minutes to clear the big trees, and that will give us a chance to wrap up M33. Probably be closer to 10 o'clock before we wrap up M33. Moon rises about 1 arc degree every 6 minutes, 6 or 7 minutes. So I need another 3 or 4 degrees before it clears the trees. The beauty of astrosurface is it replaces PIP, uh, Deep Sky Stacker, Registax, and Photoshop. It does pretty much everything that these other tools do. It is most useful for planets, and it does a very, very good job stacking them and then applying wavelets to them. Yeah, we were trying to darken it a bit. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I use astrosurface for the moon and the sun. I usually just capture an AVI video and it take care of parsing the individual frames. You can pick whatever percentage you want. It'll stack them and then you can post-process them. I mentioned a bit ago that the darks and the dwarf are getting old. There is greenish stuff here. Some hot pixels starting to show up. None of this was there a couple hours ago when we started tonight. I don't know if Seestar will allow me to adjust. Okay, we've discovered something new tonight. That Seestar indeed does allow us to adjust I don't know if it's letting us stretch the histogram or just adjust brightness. Okay, that would make sense. Seestar does darks for every new object run. That is the enhancing part that it does after it goes to the target. I read somewhere in the Seestar frequently asked questions that it does automatic dithering also for deep sky imagery. I could not validate or verify that, but that might explain the much cleaner background than on the dwarf. Mark, I ordered my Seestar on April 17 from High Point Scientific. It was delivered yesterday. Yeah, I learned about it on the 14th. I I was at the Northeast Astronomy Forum at the NEAF Expo, and that's where I first saw it. Okay, TCP/IP NOT, thanks for confirming uh, the dithering. Yeah, the stretching that I did on the dwarf image has improved it dramatically. If you are prepared to tinker, the dwarf has a lot more controls. They pretty much gave us control of everything. Seestar went the other extreme, and we don't have control over much. Mark, I don't know if dithering is going to be in the new software release on the Dwarf, but I hope they do include it. Alexander, thank you for joining us. Did anybody else see the plane transiting the moon on the Seestar? By the way, that's something I like about the Seestar. I can just move the telescope by moving the target. Looks like the dwarf is still suffering from a couple of tree branches. I don't know if I can make the focus sharper. Let me just verify that we have no binning. Yeah, the binning is turned off, so this is one by one. So those two images show you the relative field of view of the Seestar to that of the dwarf. Seestar is just over a degree, whereas dwarf is about 3 degrees. Don't know why it doesn't want to be as sharp. I mean, no doubt that the Seestar is showing a lot more detail here. I don't know if adjusting the temperature is going to make much difference. Uh-oh. So this is the moon. Okay, what is not on the program tonight is Messier 45 or the Pleiades. I'm willing to take a chance on it, even though it's not too far from the moon and even though the night is bright, uh, just to see how well the light pollution filters work on each of those two. So if you want to bear with me, I'm gonna go for the Pleiades. Well, looks like dwarf is already there. Okay. Here it becomes a judgment call if you want to let infrared or not. I'm going to stick with my rule of thumb. If it's a nebula, it's IR pass, everything else is IR cut. And we're going to level the field by going with a 90 gain and 10-second exposure. So now the two of them are identical. And hopefully it'll stop moving so we can start stacking. It looks like the Seestar is there as well. It's going to be interesting to see which one will show nebulosity first. Yeah, I agree with you, Steve. The image controls are extremely useful on the dwarf. No, we're not in the trees. We're out of the trees. The moon was in the trees. The Pleiades are a bit higher. Let me just check altitude quickly. No, the Pleiades are 18 degrees, so they're out of the trees. I usually get out of the trees at about 7 or 8 degrees, so they are way well out. But right now the moon is at 10 degrees and the Pleiades are at 18 right above it. Let me take a peek outside. I did not see any clouds. It's very likely the extremely high moisture in the atmosphere with the moon so close, uh, creating this effect. When I went out to rotate the Seestar, that weird maneuver to align the compass, the legs of the tripod were soaking wet, dripping. So in both cases, the dew heater seems to be working fine. But yeah, with this high humidity and the moon being so close, I suspect that's what's happening because I did not see any cloud in the sky. The dwarf field of view is reduced. I adjusted it to fit that. This is what it looks like otherwise. This will allow me to try an experiment since we are in experimental mode. I'm gonna stop the capture, insert the LP filter, and start again and see if that makes any difference. It's either my imagination or the Seestar uh, light pollution filter has reduced the glare. It looks like the dwarf is imaging the northern lights. Last night the moon was on top of the Pleiades of Messier 45, so it hasn't moved too far from it in a day. But I thought I'll give it a shot, and yeah, the LP filter seems to be working. It seems to be making a difference. The light pollution filter on the Seestar. Okay, I guess this has turned into an exercise in futility. I wish to thank you all for joining me tonight. Wish you a good night. I'm gonna hit the sheets. It's going on to 10:30 here, so I will sign off and so long from the Rooster Inn.